welcome to the 12th edition of Delhi Dialogue. You have already been a guest at one of our Kerala sessions. And do we need to introduce Shashi Tharoor? He's a politician whose popularity and presence far exceeds the domain of politics. The only congressman outside the Gandhi family who has an instant recall and even a fan following across states, and is second to none in articulating and defending the Nehru legacy at a time when it is under severe challenge. Also brave enough to stand for inner party democracy. So we are talking about an engaged politician, about a celebrity, not just in India, but across South Asia, Britain, and beyond, and also a public intellectual, a rare breed in these days. A three-time MP from Thiruvananthapuram, a former minister, international civil servant, prolific author, a mega social media star, and the patent holder of an enviable vocabulary. Also, one of our best read columnists. He has also seen his share of controversy, the latest being the speculation which pops up every now and then on whether he'll join the lengthening queue at his party's exit door. Today we have gathered here to hear Mr. Tharoor speak on what awaits us in May about an election that many are calling a foregone conclusion, the crumbling of the India alliance that was put together with so much fanfare, the steady exodus of stalwarts from his own party, and yes, how he himself managed to manage the impossible feat of being a Nehruvian who is also often perceived as being potentially bound for the big Golwalkar tent. What would another term in the opposition mean for the Congress if that happens? What is the alternative narrative that the Congress is putting forth to avoid such a situation? How else does he view the caste census idea? One hears some misgivings in the traditional elite support base of his own party. Also, on election funding, on foreign policy, often put out as an important part of Mr. Modi's accomplishments, and of course, the restiveness in the southern state over devolution of central funds, federalism, relationship with governors. What does MP from Thiruvananthapuram, one of the southernmost Lok Sabha constituencies, think of the hegemony of UP? What are the party's chances in Kerala where we will witness a friendly but bitter inter-India alliance fight? I invite Mr. Tharoor to make his introductory comments before opening it up for questions.
Well, thank you very much for the very generous introduction. I'm most grateful. I have to say that you've raised so many questions, I'm not sure I can address them all in one go. I want to start off by apologizing for my condition this morning. I've been overdoing things a bit and I'm somewhat under the weather, so periodically my comments are punctuated by a bad cough or a blowing of the nose. Forgive me, I have a bad cough and cold. I'll try not to breathe in your direction. One of the reasons why it's useful to be open air. And on top of that, I came back to India from Saudi Arabia the night before last, landing at 4:45, and then from Kozhikode to Delhi last night, landing at 2:35. So the result is that I am somewhat not just under the weather, but somewhat sleep deprived. So forgive me if you don't find me entirely at par, and you can always ask me to repeat myself if you want me to. Now, the issues you've raised, I think, can largely be summarized in one particular response, which is that people who keep saying, and they've been saying it since 2014, that I'm about to go off to the BJP ecosystem, simply because I don't parrot a sort of certain line and I have a receptivity to other points of view. What they're doing is they're overlooking a fundamental question of why I'm in politics at all. I mean, to be very honest and say I didn't need to be in politics. I'd had a very full career and a very satisfying one when I came back to India. And I could have found other ways of making myself useful and participating in the national conversation. But I was very convinced that in a democracy, the best way in which you can contribute to actually shaping a better society for your own people is through politics. That's what democracy is all about. And I had always assumed that because I don't come from a quote unquote political family and had no political background in India, that door would never be open for me. So when I was, to my surprise, invited to contest the elections of 2009, I said yes almost foolishly because I had actually never participated in an Indian election before. I left India when I was 19 to go to graduate school in the States, after which I started my UN career. And in those days, the minimum voting age was 21. So I'd never even voted. So I didn't quite know what I was getting into, but it was quite an amazing experience in the end, which I can talk about. It's the hardest thing I'd ever done. And I've dealt with the Yugoslav civil war and walked through minefields in Bosnia and refugee camps in the Horn of Africa. But this was really incredibly tough. And having said that, now I've spent a certain amount of time in politics. It's been 15 years, during which I've seen both its opportunities and its limitations, its perils and its pitfalls, as well as the good you can do through it. And for me, because the only reason I'm in politics is to try and contribute towards shaping a better India for future generations. Obviously, I would have to work within a party which would offer me the most congenial home for my views. Now, my views have actually been published since 1981. I have a whole bunch of books out there, which sadly I realize most people don't read, so it's very difficult to say. But amongst the core convictions I've articulated, both before and after entering politics, are a profound faith in India's pluralism and diversity. I have been an advocate of Indian civilization, but I don't see it as in the narrow terms that the BJP RSS ecosystem sees it. I see it as much more capacious and accommodating of multiple influences over the millennia. Secondly, I was a critic of the Congress's economics in the nationalization days and the state capitalist days. But after 91, those objections withered away because I'm very comfortable with the idea of an economic policy that, on the one hand, frees the private sector through liberalization, but at the same time makes it a point to expend some of the revenues or most of the revenues emerging from liberalization and the increased tax that's come from that on helping those who are marginalized and excluded in our society. So that too is an area where I'm on the same page as the post 91 Congress Party. Third, I'm profoundly convinced of the importance of democracy. And by democracy, I don't just mean voting for elections every 5 years, but a system in which people have a say in their lives between those elections, where government and elected representatives are accountable to their voters all the time. And at the same time, a situation where the government recognizes it has no place in some aspects of people's lives. I've been saying for years the government has no place in the bedroom, no place in the kitchen, no place in the living room. Let the government do what governments are supposed to do and let society evolve as it wants to, as it's capable of. But unfortunately, these three areas put me at odds with the other parties that had approached me. The week after I quit the race for Secretary General of the UN, the former BJP minister from Mr. Vajpayee's government visited me in my office in the United Nations, invited me to join. And I told him why on some of these issues we could not find common ground. To which his answer was, but which party is there which you can never have 100% agreement with? And that was a fair question, to which my answer was that maybe none, but we'll see. Um, when I visited Kerala, as I would, the communists also approached me because of my strongly secular stand on various issues. They thought we had common ground there, but I said, I can't agree with your economics. I think your way will simply put India backwards. So I didn't agree. So when the Congress approached me, which sequentially actually was third in order, but a party with which I had got onto a good wavelength with some of the leaders visiting the United Nations and New York and so on. Had met Sonia Gandhi ji a couple of times, had met Dr. Manmohan Singh from his days in the UN. So there was a certain affinity. And when they invited me to contest, I didn't hesitate to say yes. So, in other words, the answer to your question is I'm aware that a political party is two things. It is both a collection of values, principles, ideas, convictions, policies, ideologies. And that has to be largely congruent with your own, or you don't really fit in there. At the same time, a party is an organizational vehicle to take those ideas and ideologies to power. So if the ideas are great, but the vehicle is not so good, it becomes a problem. And perhaps some people who have been staunchly advocating the Congress's ideas may have had problems on the latter side. For me, at the moment, it's very, very clear that I do believe that given the what we've seen of 10 years of BJP rule, that the best alternative for the people is the set of policies and approaches represented by the Congress party. And that's why I am entirely staunchly with them. On the question of the organization, I did my part. I tried to make a bid for the leadership of the party in the sense of being in a position to bring about some changes that many people in the party were telling me were needed. And as it happens, as you all know, I was thoroughly routed, though I have the dubious distinction of being the most successful loser in the history of Congress elections. So there is that, a little footnote on the pages of Congress history. And therefore, I feel that I have to respect the wishes of the party workers and do what I can with the party as it stands. So I hope I've covered all the themes in your series of questions. But of course, you're welcome to go in further detail as you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you said a political party is a combination of ideas and ideology and programs, and is also a vehicle to contest and win elections. Congress party has been losing elections, lost two big elections. So what do you think, where do you think the party is lacking? And the ideological side, is the vehicle weak or is the ideology package and program?
No, I don't think it's chronically lacking in anything. I think what has happened with the Congress party is that it was playing catch up at some time. I'll give you one example was the adoption of social media. I think I won't hide from you the fact that when I came on social media in 2009, it was in the teeth of colossal disapproval from my party and from the government of which I was a part. In fact, no government computer in those days was allowed to go on any of these social media channels. You couldn't go on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever, on a government computer. So it had to be a purely personal activity. And every time I persuaded or tried to persuade Congress leaders to adopt, they were very resistant. And you can understand why, partially because they didn't need it to come to power, so they said, why do we need it to stay in power? And secondly, they also thought it was undignified. Some people said, how can a serious minister of the government be on something called Twitter? So I said, if you really think about it, even words like Google and Yahoo are pretty silly words, but they've become part of conversation. I guarantee you, within a decade, everyone will be. Every politician will have to be on social media, including Twitter. And I didn't have to wait a decade. It happened within a couple of years. And Narendra Modi was an early adopter. Within 4 years, in fact, I know the date exactly, July 2013, he overtook me to be the most followed politician on Twitter. And that was still the leading political forum on social media. And he has, of course, shot up since then. But the Congress did then catch up. By the time of the 2014 elections, we were beginning to catch up. And certainly, I would argue by 2019, that deficiency had been remedied. Um, Another example of difference is that we are not a classic cadre based party. As I'm facing in every election in Kerala, I have on the one hand a very strong BJP RSS. RSS has more shakhas in Kerala than in any other state, and they turn up in large numbers when they believe they can win a constituency. And they are able to knock on more doors and visit more homes more often, more regularly, more consistently than any other party. But a close second is the CPM, which is also a cadre based party. And the communists do their share of effective campaigning. We are not. So we depend on volunteers, we depend on party workers who are spending their own time and who may or may not do as much as the other parties. And that last mile connectivity, that knocking on doors aspect, of campaigning is one where perhaps we have been a little deficient. I would argue, in fact, that this is something which we will really have to tackle. Is that last stage when the voter is about to decide, to make sure that our message reaches the voter directly in her or his own home, that we are able to persuade them if they have doubts, and that we are able to encourage them to come out to vote. None of which we do, and all of which the other parties are doing better. Um, there has been an atrophying of the Congress organization in some places, particularly in the Hindi belt. There have been some places where the, the Congress structure that was there for first 50, 60 years of after independence is simply no longer there. You have a relic of an office and hardly anyone going to it. And those are institutional problems that need to be revived. But the grassroots of the party workers, there's still a lot that needs to be done. But on the other hand, the party has appeal, it has principles, it genuinely is a listening party and not a top down party. It's a man, a he, hum party. These are things that should matter to the Indian voter, provided our message reaches them. There's no question that with Mr. Modi's ability to blanket the airwaves, blanket the radio, blanket the TV, blanket the print media, mainstream media, and blanket social media with his message, that he has assumed a larger than life persona in the eyes and minds of many people. But I do point out that the only people who actually get to vote for Mr. Modi are the voters of Varanasi. Essentially, everyone else is voting also for a local candidate. So we need to emphasize the differences in what we offer. Every national election in India is simultaneously 28 state elections. I'm not saying that they are state elections. Of course, people vote differently for the assembly and for the Lok Sabha in many places. But what I mean is there are different histories in each state, different politics in each state, different realities in each state. And therefore, we could exploit those differences to hone our message. And one final answer is that if you look at Mr. Modi's confident assertions of 370, what the media is not asking him is where is that 370 coming from? The problem with the BJP is they did too well in 2019 in too many of the states where they were very strong. They got every seat in Haryana, every seat in Rajasthan, every seat in Gujarat, all but one in Bihar, all but one in Madhya Pradesh, all but one in Karnataka. 68 out of 18 UP, 18 in Bengal. I mean, if you look at the number of states, they may have a potential to increase their percentage of votes, but there are no seats left to get in these places. So the question is, if anything, in all of these states, Congress is bound to gain. They may gain very few, or they may gain very many. That depends on the effectiveness of our campaigning, as I said. But you're sure, you can be pretty sure that Rajasthan and Haryana are not going to be zero for the Congress. Madhya Pradesh is not going to be one for the Congress. There are going to be a few results, and therefore all I can see for the BJP is dropping from 303, not going up from 303. So this bravado the Prime Minister and his people are articulating, I'm surprised that all of you as professional journalists haven't questioned is a little more, saying, where do you expect to win these seats? Where are there seats left for you to win? None of the southern states will they do better. Karnataka, they will do worse. Telangana, they'll do much worse. Congress will do definitely better in Telangana. And in the Hindi heartland, as I said, there's very little flexibility anywhere to increase your seats. Northeast, even if they do better than last time, how many seats are there in the Northeast? They may get two more, three. No, no, they're not 25. You're counting all seven states together, but one of them, two of them, well, not even two. Many of them are strongly regional party dominated states, not BJP states. If BJP says BJP will go to 370 and NDA will cross 400, I'm saying where is BJP getting seats from? And the answer is there is no place that I can think of where they will do appreciably better. So that's why I do believe that this election needs a little more perspective. It can't be all about Congress's failures and BJP looking invincible and irresistible. They're not. And I think if we enter the race with a sufficient amount of determination and sincerity, you'll find better results. What's your
Yeah.
name?
Shah. So I'll add to Shahid's question that you were talking. We were skirting the issue of ideology. The first thing that I noticed is the temple in your official bungalow, and which is not something that you have hidden. You have spoken about it many times. Okay, and but here we have an election where it's not just a build up towards Hindu identity or Hindutva, but it is almost the dominating narrative to the extent that it could become a election about Ram versus Roti. So
So
in
this is
so in this, how do you kind of
but
religion has come out of
yeah, but this is
into the
precisely
public
the
domain,
ground I'm very comfortable fighting them on, because
right?
if those of you who've read my book, Why I'm a Hindu, you know perfectly well what I am indeed a sort of believing, active, convinced Hindu. I've read extensively Hindu texts in English translation. I'll admit my Sanskrit is very modest, but the point is that I understand the philosophies and they appeal to me. Also, I grew up in a devout home. I pointed out the sort of the central picture in my parents' puja room from when I was old enough to see it was a picture of Ram and Sita surrounded by all the gods blessing them. It's a classic picture. I have found a copy of that and made it, and it's framed in my room wherever I've lived as an adult, including in my puja room inside the house. Like most Indians, I pray more inside the house than in a mandir, but I did bring a mandir in. In fact, it was particularly because my late wife was a devout Shiv Bhakt, and we didn't have a ling in the house and so on. And so this was the idea. And the temple is actually dismantled from Kerala and brought here. So this is something that I have no problem with. But my understanding of Hinduism is profoundly different from the understanding of Hindutva. First of all, it's because my understanding of Hinduism is anchored in actual reading, which I fear many people don't. Vivekananda often said there's sort of four kinds of ways in which you can be devout. There is Jnana Yoga, where you read and understand through your mind. There is Bhakti Yoga, where you contribute through service of worship. That is, you go to temples and so on, pray and do rituals, all of that. There is Raja Yoga, which is meditation, looking within. And then there is Karma Yoga, which is service to fellow humanity. And these are the four ways in which the sages have told us Hindus can be good Hindus. Now, I'm not claiming to be perfect. I think Vivekananda and Mahatma Gandhi, the only two Hindus I can think of, were equally proficient in all four. I'm hopeless at meditation. I've never succeeded, so I don't even pretend to attempt to be a Raja Yogi. Um, and I have a limited um, involvement in bhakti. You know, obviously, I do pray at home, and I'm happy to go to temples. But for me, it's not an essential part of my worship because I've always grown up believing that religion is about you and your connection to the divine. So, if you look, for example, at the ancient Hindu texts, the idea of God is not at all different from the Islamic idea. It is the Nirguna Brahman. It is the idea of a divine presence around the cosmos, which is formless, shapeless, genderless, can't be seen, can't be touched, can't be spoken of. Now, the Muslims, of course, just use a written word. But our sages, after a few centuries of preaching this, realized it wasn't good enough for ordinary people. Ordinary people were worshipping trees and mountains and rivers because they needed something to focus their worship on. And that's how Hinduism came up with the concept of a Saguna Brahman, God with qualities. But they also said, obviously, no one knows what the shapeless, genderless, formless God looks like. So you are free to imagine God in whichever way you want. That's why we have 330 crore names of God and forms of God and attributes of God. Because it's giving a material shape to the spiritual ideas of Hinduism, which are philosophical ideas. And at the same time, helping our limited human imagination to find a crutch, as it were, to be able to rely upon in order to worship. And that's why, if you want to imagine God as an 10-armed woman riding a tiger, you're welcome to do so. If you want to imagine God as a pot-bellied man with an elephant's head, you're welcome to do so. And if you want to imagine God, by the same logic, you want to imagine God as a bleeding man suffering on a cross, that is fine too. Which is why Hinduism has no problem with pluralism. Swami Vivekananda frequently used to quote the Shiva Mahimna Stotram, which says that as many rivers, some straight, some winding, come from different mountains, different valleys, but end up in the same sea, so also all forms of worship reach the same divine. And this profound Hindu idea is my deepest conviction. I will not go around meeting people of other religions feeling that somehow I'm embarked on a true path that they have missed. On the contrary, their path is their path, my path is my path. Vivekananda said one more thing that perhaps I'm the first writer to have made a huge deal of it because it really struck me as a teenager and it stayed in my head and I thought about it. He said, I'm proud to speak of a faith which has taught the world not just tolerance but acceptance. And, I was reading this at a time when in history class, tolerance was considered a virtue. A tolerant king is a good king because he's actually allowing you to be who you are, etc. And then I realized the more I thought about it, it took some years, if not decades, to come to this conviction that tolerance is actually a deeply patronizing idea. What is a tolerant king really saying? He's saying, I have the truth, you are in error, but I will magnanimously indulge you in your right to be wrong. That's all tolerance is. But acceptance, which is what Vivekananda says is Hinduism, is very different. Acceptance says, I believe I have the truth, you believe you have the truth, I will respect your truth, please respect my truth. And to my mind, this was the perfect recipe for coexistence. This is how Hinduism behaved. I come from a state where the Jews came and sought refuge in 500 BC and again just before the birth of Christ when the Romans destroyed their temple. When the Christians came, they were accepted and welcomed. The Jews will tell you there is no other place in the entire world where they did not have a single instance of anti Semitic persecution. Because this was the culture of our country. We accept you, be yourself. You're welcome in our area.
And Kerala is a
And
very
Kerala is the
traditional,
best example of that.
very
But
traditional
the problem
society.
is, this is so different from the
Yeah.
Hindutva doctrine,
Yeah.
which sees and frankly has reduced the soaring majesty of
Right.
Hindu philosophy
Right.
into the team identity of the British football hooligan. The British football hooligan is notorious in Europe for saying, you don't support my team, I'm going to hit you on the head. That's not Hinduism. And that is why I consider Hindutva rather anti Hindu and rather a betrayal of what's precious about Hinduism. So, for all of these reasons, I'm very comfortable debating Hindu with these people. I remember I was invited to make a speech at the Indian consulate in '92 after the Babri Masjid tragedy. And a whole bunch of RSS people came up in order to attack me because they expected it to be one of these, godless secularists denouncing religion and so on. Instead, I spoke as a Hindu and talked about the betrayal of Hindu values, Hindu faith in destroying somebody else's place of worship. And the result was they all quietly slunk away and not one hostile question was asked by these people, even though we all knew. One of the guys in the audience was actually the head of the principal representative of the Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh, as it was called in New York. And he quietly went away. He was there for my audience, heard my speech, said, how can we argue with this? We'll need a different basis to argue. So when I say after the Ram Mandir thing, why should I surrender my Ram to the BJP? I mean it. I have an idea of Ram. I pray to Ram. I've done it since I was old enough to pray. Who gave the BJP a copyright on Ram? But I go to a temple to pray. I don't go to a temple for a political event. And an event where the Pran Pratishtha has been done by the Prime Minister, the leader of a particular political party, is by definition a political event, so I won't go there. But one day I reserve the full right as an individual to go to that temple or any other temple. I'm very curious about Kashi Vishwanath, how it's been changed. I would like to go, but I won't go at a time when it can be misused politically by anybody.
Hi, this is Shashi Tharoor. Now,
Hi.
India has reached out to the world which has been unprecedented as far as foreign policy is concerned. We recently concluded G20 presidency. We are heading the Quad summit this year, and more recently, we have seen that we managed to get the 8 Indian naval veterans that were released. So, what is your take? I mean, are we doing really exceptionally well as far as foreign policy is concerned, or there are many other global
It's
factors?
a mixed bag. I'd say that we're doing well in some respects. Where the government has done well, I have not hesitated to praise them at the time. I thought the outcome of the G20 summit was exceptionally good. The arrival of an outcome document, which literally till a day before everyone thought was going to collapse, that was well done. I would say that there was a personal triumph for Mr. Modi in selling the G20 to the Indian public as a bigger accomplishment than it actually was because it's by rotation. And in fact, our year was the previous year, but because we were having a horrendous time of COVID, we swapped with the Indonesians. Indo comes after Indi, but they were the G20 chair before us. And I say this only because I think they are very good at projecting certain ideas and presence, and certainly a lot of Indians felt good about it, and the unprecedented number of whatever 200 different conferences that took place in the course of one year in 59 different cities, I believe it was. All this is extremely impactful, no doubt about it. And though I was very critical of the initial stand of the government of India on the Ukraine invasion by Russia and our failure to stand up for the principles we had stood by in world affairs for the preceding several decades: the inviolability of borders, respect for the UN Charter and state sovereignty, inadmissibility of the use of force to settle disputes, all of that. Despite that, I will admit that today the government has so far been able to have the best of both worlds. It has been able to maintain trade on favorable terms with the Russians without getting any sanctions for violating sanctions and without undermining its existing relationship with the Western countries. That too I would consider a tick mark. On the negative side of the ledger, I think our neighborhood has largely been a shambles, whether it's been neglected because key players have been busy swanning around the globe or because of factors beyond our control. The government can explain, but they can't pretend that relationships with most of our neighbors are in good shape at all. They're not. Secondly, India's credibility as a democracy has taken a beating that had never endured except during the emergency. When a respected body like the Varieties of Democracy Institute, the VDEM Institute of Sweden, actually downgrades us from a democracy into an electoral autocracy. That is, we have free and fair elections, but after that, the government rules dictatorially or autocratically. That is a deep, deep blow because one of our biggest assets in the world stage has been the perception that we are one democracy in the developing world which has been able to successfully manage our diversity, and we're losing on both counts. I'm afraid your profession is partly in great trouble. Our ranking in the World Press Freedom Index has been plummeting every year for the last 5 years, and it's just the example after example of journalists being arrested, UAPA, no bail, various actions and prosecutions and so on have not done India any good in terms of its traditional supporting constituencies. We were admired by the liberal Democrats around the world. We are no longer so. And finally, I'm deeply concerned and remain concerned about the way in which our domestic um, social polarization, or let's put it bluntly, communal polarization, encouraged, aided, and abetted by the ruling party. I'm very concerned about how that is is playing out abroad. I mean, I travel internationally a fair bit. I pick up newspapers. I meet journalists. You will be shocked to realize if you just heard the BJPs talking about Vishwa Guru and all of that, that overwhelmingly the coverage of India is negative in most of the world's leading newspapers. 90%. The stories about India are stories about all the things that are going wrong, particularly the treatment of our Muslim minority, to some degree the treatment of our Christian minority in certain parts of India, particularly the tribal belts, the huge problems in relation to the way in which the government asserts its point of view over the media, over the opposition, the use or misuse of investigative agencies, all of that. Now, here we think that this is just the opposition making a noise. Let's go at random to any foreign country, pick up half a dozen newspapers, or pick up newspapers in half a dozen foreign countries. I read French, I read English. I don't read German, but I go on the major German papers once in a while just to see what they're saying about India and read with Google Translate. Believe me, it's not good. And that's something which is a shame because I'm the one who first brought the concept of soft power to India with the blessings of its originator, Joseph Nye, where I talked about how our underappreciated strength is our soft power. That these very things I'm talking about are our best selling points abroad. In the old days, it was all poverty and misery and handouts and begging bowls and the occasional Maharaja on a caparisoned elephant. But now it's not that. It's the fact that everything from yoga to Ayurveda to Bollywood to democracy to lively NGOs to free press, Bollywood movies, TV serials being exported, all of those were contributing to a totally different image of India abroad. That image sadly has been tarnished under BJP rule.
Hi, sir. Preeta,
Yes,
Preeta
sir.
Naik. So, you spoke about India's image abroad. So, why isn't the opposition able to make the noise and
No, because
because
as you
the
know,
opposition?
whenever Rahul Gandhi goes abroad and says anything negative about India, he's denounced as anti-national. He's attacked for taking up problems abroad. So I've, by and large, taken the view that that we should fight our own battles at home. If we can change the reality at home, the image outside will also change.
Also, one this is related to this question, the opposition has, come together to make India political. So now that all the alliances is broken and all the allies are blaming Congress for the breakdown of the coalition. So, do you did you how do you see it? Did you lose a golden opportunity here?
Look, first of all, I don't think, I don't think it's over yet. Um, First of all, I should preface this by saying I'm not involved in the negotiations with the other parties, nor am I part of the strategizing of all this. But it's always been clear to me, just as an ordinary Congress MP, that the India alliance was bound to be a state by state proposition and not a one size fits all national solution. I have evidence of it in my own state, where our principal challenge is not the BJP, except in my constituency. The principal challenge is the communists. And the communists are part of the India alliance, but would never agree to any seat sharing in Kerala, and they nor would they see any need for it. But just next door in Tamil Nadu, CPI, CPM, Congress, and DMK and Muslim League are all together in an alliance, and they get along fine, and they divide seats without any problem. So the issue comes up, why should we judge the India alliance by what is unachievable rather than by those places where it has achieved something? And many of the talks are still going on. As you know, Delhi is still being discussed. There will certainly be progress from everything I'm picking up in Maharashtra. And the party that was our ally in Karnataka has gone to the NDA, so we wish the NDA good luck in sorting out. So the truth is that if you take it state by state, the picture is not as bad as you think. And ultimately, if somebody has to sit down, I haven't done that, but I give a fairly shrewd guess that if you look at the number of seats in 2019 where an alliance would have made a difference, it will be smaller than most people imagine. See, there is a tendency for many commentators to look at the macro picture. 37% BJP, 63% non BJP, therefore the 63% get together, they'll win. That's not true. First of all, BJP didn't contest all the seats. Secondly, in many seats, BJP votes went to alliance partners. If those are not alliance partners, they'll just go to the BJP. If they are alliance partners, they'll stay within the NDA fold. So if you look, I read one figure somewhere, I don't want to repeat it because I'm not sure it's verified. I will just say that there may be a maximum number of seats that's fairly modest, in which the difference between the victory of a BJP candidate and the defeat of a second placed opposition candidate, where the margin was smaller than those of the opposition candidates put together, is a much smaller number of seats than you think, or than all the media commentators seem to assume. So for me, it's very important that we communicate a clear message. We have a common minimum program, which I would actually joke and say should be a common maximum program. So this is what we all agree on maximally. And those will include some of the issues that have already been discussed amongst the various parties. And with those elements, we can take the message. And if it so happens that secularism is being advanced by Congress and India Alliance everywhere, but in Bengal, it's being advanced separately by Congress and separately by Mamata Banerjee, or in Kerala, separately by us and separately by the communists. It's still secularism. We're still promising the public a secular India in which we'll stand up for the rights of minorities. And with that approach, it seems to me in the end, the voters will vote for the most viable candidate they see, who stands for what they stand for, what they believe in, and what they like. So the end result would still surprise me. You may end up, I agree that BJP almost certainly may end up as the largest single party because the gap between them and us is too large for us to overcome just like that without some sign of a wave. But I just believe that just looking at the mechanics of the process and a strong message from our side, you're going to find it's not impossible that BJP will drop below the majority mark, even as the largest single party if they are, and that in any case, therefore, somebody should be able to make a difference that way. But anyway, to cut a long story short, I think we shouldn't jump to conclusions too quickly. Let's fight the election and see where it ends up.
As a dynastic rule, the Congress had done pretty well. The Congress had the best record under Nehru, then Indira Gandhi, even after the emergency, I think most of India did vote for Congress. There's nothing wrong with the state of the Congress right now. Can you attribute it to any particular persons in the Congress?
What are you trying to do to me? Come on. I will.
You're going to get him into trouble.
Parties are always about more than individuals. I mean, let's take the BJP. Mr. Modi may have a larger than life image, but I think the party is about everyone. It's about the Panna Prabharis. It's about the RSS cadres knocking on every door. It's about people who are transporting old people to go and vote for them. All of that is also the party. So there's a whole collection of things, and it would be silly, I think, to blame one particular individual or set of individuals for anything that may or may not have gone right. As I said, I still think some things are going right, and we'll see. We'll talk again after the voting is done, and after the results are out, and then you can say I told you so, or I can tell you I was right. Let's see.
Sir, I have one question. I'm Diksha Sena. So, you have worked both in and outside India. So, how has this dual posture as an outsider and insider informed your view on India's political, cultural, and economical climate?
It's true that I lived abroad for a very long time. In fact, about 34 years of my adult life, from the age of 19 to the age of, yeah, just almost 53. So, given that, you would assume that I was disconnected. But the truth is, I used to, A, come back every year, often more than once a year, and meet people and talk to them and so on. Secondly, I read insanely. I was the only idiot I knew who would actually get a daily Indian newspaper sent to me by email. So it would arrive in Geneva a week after it was published in India, but I would still read the news as if it was today's news because that's how I kept abreast of all the nitty gritty of what's going on in the country. And I didn't feel that the essence of India had changed very much. One major change was the visible change that liberalization brought about. A whole bunch of foreign products we never used to have when I was growing up, foreign cars, more easy access to the outside world, etc. That change was visible, but that apart, the essence of what India was, how people were thinking, speaking, that sort of, I still think that secularism was not the ideal word, it's pluralism. But the celebration of our plural identities was great. I remember I was working for the UN in 2004, traveling in the Gulf, when the 2004 election results came in, and all that happened for a few days after that. And I can't tell you the astonishment and admiration with which all the Arab ministers and senior officials I was meeting on behalf of the UN were telling me, my gosh, Kamal kar diya, basically. I mean, here you've got an election won by a woman political leader of Italian birth and Catholic faith, who then makes way for a Sikh to be sworn in by a Muslim president as prime minister in a country 80% Hindu. And I would smile and say, listen, this is who we are. I mean, the whole line of we are like this only. We're not doing this to impress you or impress the world. This is India. And that, to my mind, has changed in the last 10 years. Because I'm hearing declaimed from political platforms thoughts that would not have been considered decent to express even behind the closed doors of somebody's house private. I grew up without hearing bigotry expressed. I grew up in a situation where my friends happened to belong to every faith. Of course, I grew up in Bombay in the initial years. That was very common there. I cannot conceive of a situation where a Muslim friend of mine comes to me. Ironically, her husband is Hindu. And she says, my 7-year-old boy was told by playmates in his building, my parents say I can't play with you because you're a Muslim. This kind of thing was unthinkable in the India that I knew and was coming back to regularly. So this is a change that I find shocking. And I can tell you that some of this dismay is felt by a lot of people who otherwise admire and accept some of the good things the BJP may have done, whether it's economy, whether it's the tech stack, I forgot to mention that on the positive side of the ledger, whether it's a sense of purpose, whether it's real or illusory. Prime Minister has been very good at using the bully pulpit of the principal political office in the land to communicate constantly, relentlessly, a sense of purpose and direction. All of that may be there, but this undermines all the things that we have changed. It's one of those things that I just give you one anecdote. I can give you a dozen anecdotes in the last few months alone. And that's the problem that troubles me, that there's something about India that's profoundly different. And as far as politics is concerned, I know one thing is completely different is the attitude of the government to the opposition. I mean, I remember Manmohan Singh going out of his way to invite Advani Sahab to breakfast and so on at the time when the BJP was opportunistically opposing the very Indo-US nuclear deal that they had started the negotiations on. And as we know from the WikiLeaks, the same BJP leaders were telling the American ambassador, listen, this is just politics. We are very much in favor of the deal. When we come to power, we'll support it, but right now we have to oppose. Don't take it too seriously. And this was reported and came out in WikiLeaks. But at least the Prime Minister was still reaching out to them on every issue. It used to be said that Congress ministers of parliamentary affairs spend more time in the opposition benches than they spend on their own side to try and see what the opposition wants, accommodate them, take them along. All the parliamentary conventions. With these guys, it's all gone. For example, if I can speak personally, in the first term, I was chairman, my first term in the opposition, that was my second term as an MP, I was chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, which was in keeping with the tradition since the beginning of the committee system. The chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee has always been an opposition MP. Well, Vajpayee Sahab, Sushma Swaraj, Gujral Sahab, they've all been chairman of the External Affairs Committee. After one term, I was kicked out by the government. And I know it didn't come from the foreign policy people because actually, as the supposedly incoming chairman, I'd already had a meeting with the foreign minister to discuss the issues we should be discussing and so on. And then, to my surprise, I was kicked out of that. That's a violation of a parliamentary convention that was valuable for India because we were showing the outside world that when it came to foreign policy, we were of one mind. Now we're no longer allowed to be of one mind. You've got, unfortunately, actually the same thing happened to me when I was, the second committee I was given, IT, except they didn't let me serve a full term. They kicked me out after 3 years because there were awkward questions coming up on internet shutdowns, on Pegasus and surveillance, on wiretapping and snooping, which could not be avoided by that committee. But then they wanted their own person there and lost. So these are violations of parliamentary convention. There's very little conviviality, very little reaching out to the opposition. The parliamentary affairs minister sees his job as lecturing parliament and the opposition rather than reaching out to them. So in all sorts of ways, there's been a change in the political culture of India as well as the social behavior of people in India.
So when you contested the election for the Congress president's post, you had put forth some ideas which you later presented as your program or the manifesto.
You can't
How
hear.
many of those ideas do you think
Can't hear.
have been implemented over a year after the election?
Look, I'd rather not go there, Shahid, simply because that was a particular time that's over. I lost, the chapter is closed. Now, it's not right for me to second guess what the winner is doing or what the party leadership wants to be done. I leave it to them to run the party in the ways they consider best. That's why you run for an election, is to ask the party members to trust you to do the right thing. They've trusted someone else to do the right thing, and as far as I'm concerned, he has earned the right to do it his way.
Acha, can I put in one more question here? There is a yatra going on in Kerala right now from your party, and you have not been seen in it yet. So, why is it? Why
No,
are
no,
you
no.
missing it?
I've not only been seen in it, I actually inaugurated the preparatory meeting in my constituency to welcome them. The conclusion of the yatra is in my district. It began in the extreme north of Kerala. And when the yatra was announced, unfortunately, unlike most politicians, my calendar tends to be full 4 to 6 weeks in advance. So I had already made commitments to a number of events throughout Kerala as well as in other parts of the country where people had issued invitations, booked halls, called audiences. You can't suddenly let them down. And since most of what I say I hope is good for the party, it was also in the party's interest that I do that. I will be inaugurating or speaking at one of the stops when I go back to Kerala in a few days' time. And of course, I will be there when they reach my constituency for the grand, what we call Samapanam, the Samapt of the whole rally. So I'm very much associated with all this, but it was always understood that this was an initiative principally by the state leadership. So the leader of the opposition and the state party president, rather than by quote unquote national office bearers, other than the inauguration in Kasaragod, where we had the general secretary from Delhi, and the conclusion where we'll presumably have another VIP guest from the national level or from one of the States where we're in power, there's some discussions going on. So the conclusion and the beginning, yes. Otherwise, it's essentially a local affair, and so it should be. It's about telling the Kerala voters in their own language what they should be voting for.
My question is on the white paper that the government came up with, the white paper on economy, the objective of which it seems to blame Congress or UPS value for whatever economic mess we had last decade. So, what is your view on that, and why was the Congress response not as emphatic as it should have?
Well, first of all, I had already anticipated since they announced there would be a white paper. This comparison in my budget speech, where I led the opposition on the budget discussion in the Lok Sabha, I had given a number of figures showing an unfavorable contrast to the NDA government by comparison with the UPA. 10 years of growth, you just go through my speech, you'll find the facts I can send it. The problem is there is selective cherry picking of figures. But the worry about the NDA government is what they have done to the credibility of our figures. We have had serious and humiliating argument with WHO on COVID deaths. We've had two of our top three statisticians in the country resigning in protest against attempts to manipulate the statistics. We've had no national consumption survey. We've had none of the normal interactions with ordinary Indians' lives that would give you accurate figures on the basis of which you can do anything from estimating poverty to calculating growth to estimating your fiscal deficit. Everything else, fiscal deficit, yes, you've got taxes versus revenues, but everything else, their figures are so unreliable and frankly have undermined India's reputation around the world for accurate figures. I remember when I was a graduate student in the West, there was always an unfavorable comparison between China's figures, which no one trusted, and India's figures, which everyone trusted because we had a strong statistical base. Now look at us. No one is at all sure about any of our figures, and half the government's claims are contested by international economists, including those of Indian origin, including one who was the chief economic advisor to the BJP government and is now sitting in a think tank in Washington questioning everything the BJP is doing. So I have to say their white paper is actually, it doesn't stand up to scrutiny once you start looking at figures. And whatever claims they make are made without any statistical basis because there's no data. That's why I joked in Parliament that NDA should stand for no data available. Because on most issues there isn't any data. Okay, I think we've done our 1 hour. Sorry?
You also recited a nice Hindi kavita, something, somehow. Long
Yeah, that was fun, but it was also actually made a valid point because I got lots of perfect strangers saying that the poem spoke for them and their own experience. It went around rather widely for a while.
really good.
I think we've done it. Haven't we? We've done an
One,
hour
or
already.
one or two questions. Last two questions. Parvez?
Brief questions
Yeah.
and brief answers.
Sir, when you see yourself part of memes on social media, which are
So a little higher.
uh,
Yeah.
when you see yourself part of memes on social media, sometimes they are funny, but sometimes annoying, and So how do you cope with that? Are you stressed?
No, I take it in good spirits, especially the ones that are essentially harmless. There are some that poke fun at me in a fairly innocent way. There are some that are obviously orchestrated by a particular political party in order to give me a particular kind of image, just as they tried to make Rahul Gandhi into a puppet. They tried to make me into some sort of Casanova. And after a while, I just stopped paying attention to those. But other ones are fairly harmless. I mean, I even told my team I appreciated one meme that was going around. I thought I was poor until I met Tharoor. Now I realize I'm impecunious. I thought that wasn't bad. That was pretty clever. So that kind of thing. But the other things going on, these stupid gibberish messages saying Shashi Tharoor just wish me for Diwali and full of incomprehensible words strung together without meaning. Those I don't appreciate. And yes, inevitably my own friends forward them to me and I tell them, for God's sake, don't do this. But anyway.
Amitabh, you had something to ask?
Another one I didn't mind was that I was cracking a coconut at a temple in Kerala. And they took out the picture of me with the coconut and did memes putting me in a cricket field, putting me above a rock trying to throw it on the BJP leader, all sorts of things. That was all. It was in good spirit. It was fun. You have to take it in stride.
Hi, I'm Amitabh. As leader of the IT committee, uh, have you seen at what level is the government and opposition approaching these elections on deep fakes or meddling in the digital field, maybe with other intentions, not just from within India? Is there any understanding of
No, I think at this point, this is not yet a major issue as far as I can tell. You may know that I was myself subject of an experiment just last weekend in Thiruvananthapuram, the Madhubhumi International Festival. They came and interviewed me on some issues to do with AI and so on. I answered. When the video came out, the questions were being asked by an AI fake of me, and I was answering them in this two clone thing. Of course, they had got my permission, and they have signed a contract to delete all the raw footage once it's done. But what they told me is this was surprisingly easy and inexpensive to do. And therefore, it can be potentially misused massively. So I did it as a consciousness raising thing. It wasn't just a gimmick for a particular literary festival. It was meant for people to be aware of the great dangers of this technology. But so far, there's very little evidence of being used. If there were, you'd have a rash of people claiming that such and such thing is a deep fake, and so there's hardly been anything. I mean, after poor Rashmi Mandana, there's hardly been any example of a prominent Indian who has been the object of a deep fake that's meant to be taken seriously. I mean, there's a deep fake of me doing a scene from Mission Impossible, clinging to a rock and fighting biceps I wish I had ever had in my life. Those are, everyone knows it's not real. It's fun. That I don't know. But if they do a deep fake of me looking like this, talking to you and saying horrendous things like, I'm about to go and join the BJP tomorrow, whatever, then that would be a real problem because in our today's social media world, these things can do damage very quickly and it takes much longer for the damage to be rectified. By the time people believe or learn to believe that what was alleged is not true, they were already voted. So I worry about these elections less than I worry about future elections and the politics of the future between elections also. So,
I'm Kavita from Electoral. So I have one question is in the parliament you have taken up the cause of the doctors and how they are beaten up in the parliament. Have you got any good response from the minister on this? And the second question is NAPI, that is a
and I got a response from the minister and I was not happy with it. As I said so in a subsequent opportunity in Parliament. He said, we thought about this issue, but we can't give any special protection to doctors because in every other profession we wanted to, and we soon have to have laws for chartered accountants. So that I said that is simply an unreasonable answer, because the fact is that doctors are dealing with life and death work. It's not the case of chartered accountants or other people, and so attacks on doctors in medical facilities by desperate families or dangerous patients. This girl in my constituency, 23 years old, was stabbed to death by somebody brought in by the police for having attacked someone else, and the police couldn't protect her against his attack. He just grabbed surgical scissors and stabbed her. So this is the kind of thing that happens to doctors far more. And I think I gave some exact figures. If you please look at my remarks in Parliament, if I'm not mistaken, it's something like 75% of all Indian doctors have experienced some episode of workplace violence. No profession comes close to that. So there is a case for a separate law.
and this NAPI, that's a think tank which has written to political parties and politicians, including you, on in the manifesto to include steps to cut down junk food. So they have also written to you. So any
Have you got that letter, John? I haven't seen it yet.
yeah, they have got a response from your office.
That's
Oh
why
my
we are
God.
only having coffee today.
So they have basically appealed to all the political parties. Basically, junk food consumption is becoming
A real menace, yeah.
So, anything on that.
There's one story in your that speculating with Tamil Nadu, there is Tamil Nadu is BJP or not. So if the party kind of it's sending a kind of message that the parties are not on a course correction.
I think the party has already spoken about this.
Because
A
yes.
number of friends and associates of Sri Kamal Nath have said this is nonsense. His own people have been putting this out. The same with Manish Tiwari. He's put out some of his critical speeches in the BJP. I think we should understand that speculation is your game, but there's no reason for us to add fuel to your speculation.
But the Congress also saw kind of high profile exits in this month itself, at least four.
I'm not going to comment on that now, but we'll talk privately sometime. I'll tell you what I think. No, see, nutrition, I'm slightly torn. I'll tell you why. I have always believed, as I say, that the government has no place in people's personal lives. Just as I don't want the government telling me whom to love, whom to go out with, whom to have in my home for a live-in relationship, or whom to what to eat. Do I want the government to tell people not to eat certain things. So the question is awareness, yes. Just as we have smoking kills warnings, we should oblige people to know that if you're going to eat this much of junk food, these are the consequences of everything. And I must say that social media is already abetting it. Because, I get, like everybody else, these dozens of WhatsApps on all sorts of subjects. And many of them talk about the dangers of how Coca Cola can kill a plant, or all these things are going around, or and how various natural foods are good for you and good for your health as well, and have benefits more than just their taste, etc. So I think people are getting more and more conscious, but the governments can abet that by encouraging a public awareness campaign. But I would be very hesitant for government to take any punitive measures, any bans, any restrictions, any higher taxes, etc., just yet, because I think I'm enough of a liberal to believe that people have the rights even to do bad things, provided they don't hurt others. If you eat junk, you're hurting yourself, and somehow you have the right to do that. And that's my philosophy on most issues, just as I talked about Hinduism. Be yourself as long as you don't hurt me, and I will respect you. You respect me, and I won't hurt you. That's a great recipe for coexistence, and I think that's how India should, by and large, tend to be. I was always critical, even before I came into politics, of the government sort of banning fashion TV, or these are silly things. I said, let people change the channel if they don't like it. Why should somebody who doesn't like something deprive others who do like it of watching it? It makes no sense. And I've never found a satisfactory answer from the nanny state that the BJP is running.
I'm Shashi Tharoor. Sir, you were the number one party till 2009. But after 2009, there is a degradation of the party, the ideology and everything. Now, the BJP-led Modi government has taken a stand that it wanted to make opposition look Bharat. Like, if someone has to be taken a task, then to slap a case of PMLA against the leader, that particular leader will come to do it. How do you see the Congress party will try to cash in on the next election?
Now, look, we are certainly pointing these things out. Um, the important thing is that we have to reach people who are not traditionally voting for us. One of the most dismaying facts I have seen from the last two elections is that our vote percentage remained about the same. It was 19.5% in both 14 and 19. And I have been saying within the party and also publicly during the presidential campaign that we have to appeal to people who are not already convinced by a message. That's, I hope, sort of one of my strengths in my constituency, because my constituency is no longer a natural Congress constituency. I have to appeal to voters who may not, in other circumstances, vote for a standard Congress candidate. The two elections before mine were won by the communists. The last two elections, the BJP came second. So if I have to differentiate myself from them, it has to be in ways that show them that I represent them and their thinking and their values in ways that they can relate to and be proud of. That kind of message I think we need to convey more and more, because if we get 19.5 again, we're not going to come to power. We need to take that up to 25 or so percent, and we need to particularly increase in the Hindi belt states. In the Hindi belt states, we have a genuine challenge, because in about 200 seats, I believe, it's a straight fight between us and the BJP. It's not an India alliance issue. It's essentially straight between us, and we've got to do better there. So those things are the answer. I mean, we can't afford, it seems to me, to ignore what the BJP is doing to our democracy, and we should point out the very great dangers to our democracy and to the way people live in this country. Rather than allowing the BJP to set the narrative by talking about Vishwaguru and 1,000 years of Ram Raj and all of this stuff, we have to talk about what is this Ram Raj going on right now? Talk about it. I've once, for example, an audience in Bombay, 500 people, not a Congress audience, it was a university kind of stuff. I said, I'd like to ask you all, how many of you or your families have benefited from any specific actions or policies of the BJP government in the last 9 years? It was 9 years, a year ago. In the 500 people, one woman raised her hand, nobody else. So the issue that I want to keep asking voters is, Think of your self-interest. How have you benefited? If you voted for Mr. Modi 10 years ago because you thought you'd have a job and you still don't have a job, why vote for Mr. Modi? If you voted for um, all the promises of economic growth, ask yourself, how has that benefited you? Have you got a job? Has your salary gone up? Is there enough in your pocket for you to go to the bazaar and buy the same items you could afford to buy 2 years ago? I ask these questions to my voters, and the answer, I'm afraid, across the board is no. They're not doing better. Somehow the BJP has succeeded in diverting voters, and particularly the media, away from these dal roti questions into illusory issues of, Vishwaguru and Ram Raja and G20 and Ram Mandir and all of these things, which are not matters that actually have any impact on people's lives and are not matters you're electing the government to do. You're electing the government to give you a better life. Do you have a better life? I ask you also, do you all have a better life? Are you better off? And if you can't answer that, then think about why that question is worth asking. Thank you all very much. I really have to go. Take care.